Okay, now, what I've decided to do here with this composition, I want to get some text into this image. Maybe this is going to wind up being a poster for an event, or maybe a postcard of some sort, or who the heck knows. And what I have in mind here is I want to create a white stripe running right across, let's say about the bottom third of the image, right? Now, I suppose what I could do is I could head over to the layers palette and I could select the statue layer, and I could create the white stripe directly on the statue layer. But you know, if I do that, then I would never be able to separate the white stripe from the statue ever again. Do you know what I mean? So in other words, if I create the white stripe directly on the statue layer, then it's a permanent change, or it's a permanent addition, I guess I could say, to my composition. And how I like to work is I try to keep everything as editable as possible. Who knows, down the road I might decide, you know, that white stripe really should have been across the top of the layout, or you know, something like this. So I hope that makes sense. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and create a new blank layer inside my image. And of course, we already know how to do this. I'm going to head all the way down to the bottom of the layers palette and click on the little page icon there, new layer. And I want to make sure that this new layer is all the way at the top of the layers palette, because I want my white stripe to sit on top of the entire composition, right? So he's going to be again at the front of the image, right? And then how do I actually go about creating a white stripe? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab my rectangular marquee tool out of the toolbox. By the way, there's lots of different ways to create white stripes and white rectangles. This is kind of the quick way. So I grab my rectangular selection tool, and all I'm going to do is click and drag out a rectangle, maybe something like that. Now, the cool thing here is it doesn't even have to be perfect. Don't worry about it. If you kind of mess it up, or maybe it's too short, or it's, you know, not stretching all the way across your image, don't worry about it, because I'm going to show you a really cool trick for adjusting your rectangle in just a moment here. All right, now next up, what I'm going to do here is I want to fill the rectangle with white. So in other words, that's going to create our white stripe for us. Now, just do me a favor and hit the D key on your keyboard. And what that will do is that will ensure that your foreground and background colors down at the bottom of the toolbox are at their defaults. In other words, you should have black in the top left and white in the bottom right. All right, now, with that set up, what we want to do now is we want to fill the selection with the background color. How do you do that? Well, give this a try. On the Windows side, hold down Control. On the Mac side, I'm going to hold down Command and simply hit your Delete key on your keyboard, and that will fill your selection with the background color. Awesome. As a quick point of interest, if you're interested here, so holding down Control or Command and hitting Delete will fill with whatever color you have inside that background color swatch. Holding down Alt on the Windows side or Option here on the Mac and hitting Delete will fill with your foreground color, whatever color you have in there. All right. Good stuff. Go ahead and get rid of your marching ants. You can deselect there, Command D or Control D. And I mentioned a moment ago that I wanted to show you a method for adjusting your white stripes. Maybe you're not happy with it. Maybe you want them to be thicker or thinner, or who the heck knows. Again, because we created this guy on his own layer, he's now independent of the other objects inside our composition. So he's independent of the statue, he's independent of the clouds. So I could, for example, grab my Move tool. I just tapped the V key on my keyboard. And what I can do now is I can move my rectangle around inside my image. And again, he's floating on top of everything, so I haven't made any, destructive changes to my image or anything like this. Everything is still editable, but give this a try. What if we use our free transform on this white stripe? So I'm going to hit Command T on my keyboard here, and maybe I'll just zoom in a little bit so we can see this here. There he is. And I'll just make this guy a little bit skinnier maybe, or maybe I'll bring him down a little bit on the bottom there, or perhaps in on one side, or perhaps in on the other side. This is great. I love this because it's completely editable, and that's how I like to work in Photoshop. Again, whether it's special effects I'm doing or color correction, I'll show you all this stuff later on, how to work with this stuff in a non-destructive way inside Photoshop, because I like to have options. I come back to this 6 months from now and go, white stripe across the bottom. What the heck was I thinking? The white stripe should be across the top, something like this, and it should be skinnier, and, all the rest of it, right? So, again, we have options. We have choices here, so long as we keep everything on its own layer inside our document. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with something like this. I'm going to hit enter to lock in that change, and I'll just zoom out here so we can see how this guy looks. I think that looks pretty good. You know, we should rename our layer though before I forget, and I'm bad for this. I get into that creative process and I wind up with layer 13, layer 14, layer 15 inside my layout, and I go, what the heck is on layer 12? So I try to remind myself as I go to rename my layers. So again, just double click on layer 1 there, and maybe I'll just call this guy Stripe. Okay, perfect. Enter to lock that in.